This is Hannibal back here from thehannibaltv.com. Just finished watching the third episode of season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring about Eddie Graham and the Graham family's suicides. I guess Eddie Graham's father had killed himself. From what I understand, Eddie killed himself. His son Mike killed himself, and the grandson killed himself. A lot of this stuff had been talked about in shoot interviews before. The one thing that Dark Side of the Ring got that that weren't there was a couple interviews that haven't been out there, but were the family interviews. The daughter of Mike Graham in particular, who lost the father and brother. Sad story. One thing that was kind of glossed over when they went into the situation of after Eddie Graham killed himself, Mike taking over and things falling apart. They didn't really get into a big reason for that was Dusty Rhodes leaving and taking all the top talent and going to Crockett. That was one of the big things as well. Unless I somehow missed that, it seems like that wasn't really covered. But I mean, it was about the family suicides mostly, and then the end of it, they went into reach out and tell people if you're thinking about doing that, which always sounds nice. And I suggest people do try and get help. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people don't actually care. Your family members probably do care. But one thing that I found when I've been depressed, and I know it probably happens to a lot of people, that if you get in those states, people will actually want you less and less in your life. So it becomes harder to reach out to people. But definitely try with family members and professional help. But the thing that people always say is, oh, just tell somebody, talk to someone. That's going to solve everything. A lot of times people actually don't want to hear it. That's just the sad truth of the matter. But I definitely think people should try and get help in one way or another, or help themselves, try and attack the root of the cause. Obviously, with Eddie's death, there was a lot of alcoholism involved, and continuing to drink is obviously not going to solve any of the problems. It's only going to make your problems worse in a situation like that. So this was a sad one. It did the best rating so far of any Dark Side of the Ring this year, 0.06. The ratings came out today for that. Having dogs helps. That's true. Having dogs does help. There's all kinds of rumors that he was involved in some type of land scheme. That Ronnie Garvin said in an interview with me that Mike Graham had like a $500,000 check related to Eddie Graham's death that he was showing off to Ronnie Garvin. And of course, there was other women involved apparently with Eddie. They did talk about Jerry Graham and this, Billy Graham's old partner, who also was a really, really, really bad alcoholic. There's so many stories about him, and he was one of the greatest heels of all time. But sadly, the alcoholism ruined him. I mean, there was one story where Harley Race had to throw him in a U-Haul trailer and lock him in a U-Haul trailer and drive him to a town because he was so out of control. And when they opened it up, it was full of piss and shit. But yeah, and the other thing is, once WCW closed, WWE didn't pick up Mike Graham. So, I mean, even if he did have money and investments and stuff, he was then out of the wrestling business. So who knows how much of an effect that had on it. It was nice to see that his daughter is in a good place and seemed happy. Nice. Kevin Sullivan was in this one, as well as Jim Cornette, who seems to be in almost all of them, if not all of them. So, yeah. there you go. This is the only TV show that I really watch. And of course, the episode that I'm in is July the 25th, the Abdullah the Butcher episode. Can we say both Eddie and Mike were killed by hands of stone Ronnie Garvin? I don't know about that. The one contradictory thing in that, for at some points in time in this, they were saying that Eddie Graham was the greatest wrestler ever to come out to Florida, and others it was Dusty Rhodes. So they were both over in Florida, that's for sure. And Kevin Sullivan, I think, did his best work in Florida by far. His stuff in there is great. And one thing I didn't know until recently was after Bob Roop did that whole Plan B thing in Knoxville, after I guess Rumble, people knew that he had a lot. He came to Florida under a different gimmick in Sullivan's Army, which I only found out recently. They did show the Bob Roop stretching stuff, how they would stretch wannabe wrestlers, and that was a way of like making wrestling seem real. You'd beat up the guys that wanted to be wrestlers, so they'd go back to the real jobs and say, "Oh, these guys are really tough." And you know what? I think it was Kevin that said in this, or it could have been Brian Blair. Brian Blair was another guy in this, that if you lost a fight to a mark, you would be fired. Remember when Seth Rollins got beat up by a mark? Remember that? And now he's been christened world champion. How times have changed. He didn't even say he tripped the next day, as what's his name? Jack Victory said that Seth Rollins should have, the next day after the mark took him down, and he, like, literally security and referees had to save him from this guy. The next day he said it was the most terrifying moment of his life. And Jack Victory's like, why didn't he say he tripped? He's like putting over the mark even more. The Purple Haze was Mark Lewin, one of the all-time greats. That, you know, for people that live long, like, there's a story in Ric Flair's book about Mark Lewin and Piper being like two of the craziest partiers. And at one point in time, they had like a competition on who could drink and do the most drugs. And according to Flair's book, Piper got the nod. Of course, Piper's been gone now for a long time, I think 9 years. But Mark Lewin, I believe, is like in his 80s now, or late 70s, and still going strong. So I guess Mark Lewin ultimately put Piper to bed. I guess you could say that. Someone says the family was cursed. I don't know if I believe family curses. I believe some people are more susceptible to addictions than others. 100%. They definitely are. And the people that aren't susceptible to it can't understand how the people that are susceptible to it have issues like that. But they need to really watch themselves and be surrounded by people that will not bring them into that world. They need to try and stay around circles that will not lead them to further downfall. So I won't give any examples, although there's many in wrestling I can think of. And lots of people in wrestling have various issues, particularly in the old days, where I think Lanny Poffo said it. Does wrestling attract crazy people, or does wrestling make people crazy? This is the old days of wrestling, not today's, where you're paid to train and they recruit college graduates and everybody's cookie cutter. But in the old days, maybe you had to be a little bit crazy to be in wrestling, but wrestling would actually make you crazier in a lot of ways. There's very few from the old days that didn't have a little bit of a wild side to them. Bruno Sammartino, maybe Bob Backlund are two that stick out to my mind from the territory days, because even the Briscoes were wild. Edward, it's a shame that Vince McMahon exposed the business. Wrestling will never be the same. There could still be more of an element of kayfabe, more believability to it, but they don't even try anymore. They don't even try, sadly. And yeah, it's probably a little bit of both. But in the wrestling business at one time, and I'm not exaggerating this because it still existed when I first got in it, and this caused a lot of my problems that I'm getting a hold of now, is you used to be cool if you were a wrestler, if you could drink the most, if you could bang the most women, if you could cheat on your wife the most, if you could do the most stuff. That's what made you cool in wrestling. And in the old days, the veterans would test you. And unless you're like some super college athlete or some very special person, you would have to pass these tests or you wouldn't be considered one of the boys and you wouldn't even be allowed in the business. And you had to also be tough. You had to be prepared to fight for the credibility of wrestling at the drop of the hat. So it attracted a lot of unique characters, which is why the characters overall in wrestling in the old days were so much crazier. but a lot of them are dead. A lot of them died real early. So, anyways, another episode in the books. I think it's Matt Bourne next week. Another one that died very young. So looking forward to that one. I know that's Mike D's favorite wrestler, Doink, the original and best Doink the Clown. It will definitely be Matt Bourne. None of the other ones can touch him.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest